In this video, we'll be learning how to solve quadratic equations by using the square root method. Now, it's important to note that this method only works when your quadratic equation has a b term of 0. Remember, quadratic equations have a standard form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So the b term is our middle term that goes with our x variable. When b is 0, there's no middle term or b term in your quadratic equation. This is when you're allowed to take the square root method. If your b term is not 0, this method wouldn't be an option. To solve using the square root method, you're going to isolate your x, or your variable, just like you would when solving any other equation. So we're going to use inverse operations here and start by adding 98 to both sides of the equation, which will give us 2x squared equals 98. Now we want to divide by 2 to isolate the x, which leaves us with x squared equals 49. Now, in order to get rid of that squared, we need to use our inverse operation of squaring something, which would be square rooting it. So we're going to take the square root of both sides of the equation. On the left side, that leaves us with x. On the right side, the square root of 49 is 7, but it also could be negative 7, since negative 7 times negative 7 equals positive 49. So when using the square root method, anytime you square root a positive number that's not 0, you will end up with two solutions, the positive and negative square root. We often write this as plus, minus, and the number, so x equals plus or minus 7, although you could write it as 7 and negative 7, so two separate numbers. In our second problem, we're going to follow the same process, but note that the directions ask us to write our answers in simplified radical form. So if we have a number that we're trying to square root that's not a perfect square, you have two options. You can write the answer as a decimal that you round, or you can simplify the radical. In this example, we're going to use simplified radicals. So again, I'm going to start by isolating my x. So I'll use my inverse operation. So I'll subtract 8 from both sides. So 4x squared equals 112. Dividing by 4 gives me x squared equals 28. And again, I will square root both sides, remembering that I know I have a positive and a negative. Now remember here that I can simplify the radical, or the square root of 28. 28 is not a perfect square, so I would look for perfect square factors that this would break apart to. I know that 4 goes into 28 7 times, so I can split it to 4 and 7. I know I'll need that plus minus, and so my final answer would be positive or negative 2 radical 7. So notice we're applying our simplifying radicals steps to this solving by square roots example. For our final example, the problem appears to be very similar to the other ones. So I'll start by subtracting 18, and I'll plan on solving using the square root method. This gives me x squared equals negative 9. The next step would be to take the square root of both sides. However, if I'm trying to come up with a number multiplied by itself that equals negative 9, I'll realize there are no solutions here. There is no number that when you multiply it by itself, it can equal a negative, because a positive times a positive is a positive, and a negative times a negative is also a positive. You can also verify this by trying to take the square root of negative 9 on your calculator, and you will see that it gives you an error. So when solving by square roots, if you're ever taking the square root of a negative number, since that's not possible, we would say that this equation has no real solutions. That's all for this lesson. Have a great day.